is fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Double Diesel Sports Podcast, the podcast where we talk everything National Football League, in season, off season. It does not matter because it is football. I'm your host, Double Diesel, and welcome back to the show. Before we begin, as always, if you have not done so already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you enjoy this content or know anybody that would enjoy this kind of content. Helps boost our numbers, get us out to more eyeballs out there in the algorithm. So if you have not done so and you would like to, that would mean the absolute world to me. Also, if you like to, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports to help support this channel financially. If you like to, the link to that be in the description down below. But let's get on with the show. But before we actually do that, one more thing I forgot. Let's address the obvious. Things look a little bit different from the last time you saw me. I got a new setup. I got a new camera. I got some new lights. I got a little bit of a new set going on here. I really like how this looks personally. I've been playing around with this all day. I really like how it turned out. Let me know in the comments down below if you like this new setup. It might not be the final setup. I might still play around with this a little bit, but for the most part, I really liked how this set turned out. Let me know if you enjoy this moving forward. It really looks a lot more professional than we've been on this channel in a while. So I just wanted to start with the obvious first. But let's go into this. The regular season officially over, officially wrapped up in the books. It felt like it just flew by, man. I don't like how fast this season felt like it went by. But just like that, playoffs start this Saturday. Super wildcard weekend starts on Saturday. But I know, unfortunately, I have to start the show off on a little bit of a bummer. As always, when the regular season ends, many fans of disgruntled franchises look forward to what is known in the football world as Black Monday, or in this case, Black Monday and Tuesday, and potentially even for some other fans, Black Week, because there have been coach firings that have happened on Monday and today, and it might not be the end. We might get some more news as the week progresses. And we got to start off with the probably most savage coach firing I've ever seen on a Black Monday. And that is what Arthur Blank pulled for the Atlanta Falcons in firing Arthur Smith at 12:01 Eastern Standard Time. The Bills-Dolphins game had ended. I was getting tired. I was getting ready to go to bed, and I heard the ding from the notifications on my phone, and I look up, and sure enough, Schefter reported at 12:01 that Arthur Smith had been fired as the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. They didn't waste time. They knew what they wanted to do, and we had all gotten that sense that this was going to go in this direction. Football fans like myself, everywhere, not just Falcons fans, we are rejoicing at this firing because Arthur Smith has basically been a war criminal on player utilization. Ever since they have taken over, this regime in particular has taken over for the Atlanta Falcons back in 2021, they have accumulated a bunch of talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They've accumulated talent on the defensive side as well. You know, the Jesse Bates signing was huge for them last year. The Jeff Okudah trade I thought was a decent trade at the time. But they really harped in on the offensive side of the ball after all when they hired Arthur Smith from the Tennessee Titans. He was a big offensive guy. He was known as an offensive guru, as a guy that, you know, really unlocked Derrick Henry, who knew how to use the players on his team to the best of their abilities. That was his whole thing when he got hired. And they acquired so much talent, mainly young talent, through the draft because they had this strategy of doesn't matter what our needs are, doesn't matter where we're picking, we're just going to pick the best offensive skill player available. They did that in 2021 with Kyle Pitts. They did that in 2022 with Drake London. And they did that last year in 2023 with Bijan Robinson. And there was also some other talents they acquired at other ports of the draft as well. Tyler Algier, I thought, was a really nice pick in the later rounds in 2022. So accumulating talent was not an issue. The issue was, remember when I said earlier that Arthur Smith knew how to utilize the talent he had? Either that was a lie, we misinterpreted it, or he just straight up forgot how to do so. Because Kyle Pitts, ever since he's been drafted, has not really been the super weapon, not even close to it, that we expected him to be. Drake London's been fine, but they are using him on an inconsistent basis. And then the biggest crime this past year was Bijan Robinson, who they drafted 8th overall out of Texas, who was, in my opinion, by far the best overall player in last year's draft class. And I thought, hey, Arthur Smith is a guy that wants to run the football. Him and Tyler Algier, who had a breakout year in his rookie year, they're going to be a two-headed monster, and they're just going to run the fuck out of the football. Except, apparently, they don't like using Bijan Robinson. Incredible talent. One of the best talents at the running back position we've seen in a long time coming out of the draft, probably since Saquon. It took him till week 14 for him to finally somewhat figure out how to use Bijan. You have this incredible matchup nightmare with Kyle Pitts, who you drafted with the 4th overall pick, the highest pick a tight end has ever been selected at. And you're not scheming up plays for him, and you're sitting him and drawing up plays in favor of guys like Michael Pruitt and Jonnu Smith. You're not giving carries to Bijan, and instead are giving carries to Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson, who, I get it, Cordero Patterson's been a nice pickup in this regime, but Jesus Christ, not after you spent the 8th overall pick on a running back. He has been a war criminal on fantasy football players, and he's just been a war criminal on the sport of football in general, that I was nervous that Arthur Blank was going to keep around, because they still went into this weekend with a legitimate chance of not just making the postseason, but to winning their division. Thank God New Orleans slapped them silly, which, by the way, the ending of that game was kind of hilarious. And it's almost fitting that Arthur Smith's tenure as Falcons head coach ends with a team basically running the score up on him, and then him cussing out the coach of the opposing team afterwards. That was kind of funny. But it was almost fitting. And outside of Brandon Staley, who got fired mid-season and was easily the most hated coach in the league because of his sheer stupidity, Arthur Smith was right up there with him. I don't know how you went from legitimate offensive guru to not knowing how to use your talent. You're using your top tier talents as decoys every week. Eventually, teams are going to catch on and be like, hey, he's not going to use these guys. I don't get it. Why was the strategy in every single draft to draft the best overall player on the offensive side of the ball with the highest upside possible if you're just going to scheme up plays for guys who are significantly less talented than them? And the most frustrating part is, it's not like you don't understand how hard it is to find not just great football players, but to find great athletes who are also great football players. Being a great athlete is not the same as being a great football player. A lot of people don't realize that. You can be a phenomenal athlete, but if you don't know how to play the game of football, it's not going to matter. You know, I think of guys in the past like Jamarcus Russell or Speedy Noyle, a lesser known name guy, but he was a phenomenal athlete coming out of high school, but he just was not a great football player. The Falcons don't have that problem, but it's hard to find a guy that's both a great football player and a great athlete. You don't understand how hard that actually is. The Falcons have 3 of those guys. 3 of them. And Arthur Smith rarely ever used them on a consistent basis. Explain to me how an offensive-minded coach has 3 super athletes who also are great at the game of football and just chooses not to use them. He made his own bed. He now has to lay in it. And forget head coaching job. He's never going to get a head coaching job again after this. I'm struggling to think, is he ever going to get an offensive coordinator job ever again? Because maybe that could be the case. You know, because some guys are just better coordinators than they are as head coaches. That happens. But sometimes guys are so bad as head coaches that they don't even get coordinator jobs ever again. I think Arthur Smith might be one of those guys. But that wasn't the only one. The next one that happened also later that day, at least this team had the courtesy of allowing him to be awake at the time they fired him. But it was a firing that was not shocking whatsoever. It was Ron Rivera. The Washington Commanders officially moved on from him on Monday. And that was not really all that shocking. We knew pretty much since the start of the season that they were going to let him go at the end of the year. Ron Rivera is just another case of a guy that was just flat out past his expiration date. You know, it looked like they might be able to get something going there because there was a lot of hope around the defense. There was still a lot of intrigue around Sam Howell and what he can do. And for a while, he looked like one of the lone bright spots on this team until he absolutely just fell off a cliff. And then, you know, that front seven that they really hang their hat on during the Ron Rivera years, that terrifying front seven, they completely dismantled it. They traded away both their edge rushers in Chase Young and Montez Sweat. The latter looks like is a phenomenal get for the Chicago Bears. As a Pro Bowler this year. And, you know, it's been a writing on the wall. Frankly, I was shocked that he was the head coach coming into this year. I thought they would have let him go after last year because he's just getting up there. He's had health issues in the past. And, the firing itself there's nothing really to talk about because it was something we all kind of expected. Now, the Josh Harris group has made it clear they want to reestablish the greatness that this franchise once had before, you know, Daniel Snyder bought the team. And they are very clearly looking to try and reboot this franchise and have it back restored to some kind of glory. And keeping Ron Rivera around was clearly not going to allow that to be the case. Now, the question is, who do they go after? We don't know entirely yet. There's still a lot of things to be played out. But they did hire a couple guys to help lead that charge. Not just in finding a head coach, but to deal with the potential day-to-day operations with this team going forward. One of them is Rick Spielman, a former longtime general manager for the Minnesota Vikings. They're bringing him in. You know, like I said, he's been there. He's been in the league for a long time, so he knows how to deal with this. The other guy they brought in, though, was a lot more surprising. They brought in Bob Myers, who, those of you who are aware with football and football only, probably don't have a goddamn clue who he is. Bob Myers is the man that was the general manager in building arguably the greatest basketball dynasty in NBA history in the Golden State Warriors. So yeah, that was a hiring that kind of came out of left field. A guy who was an incredible general manager in the NBA is now transitioning over to the National Football League and is tasked with building this team that is at the dump, who is currently sitting with the second overall pick in the draft and now has to rebuild this thing. I don't know how he's going to fare because building a team in the NBA is very different than how they build a team in the NFL. For one, the draft in the NFL, as far as the offseason goes, free agency comes first and then the draft comes a couple months later. In the NBA, the draft happens first, like a week after the season, and then free agency happens. So just from even a scheduling standpoint, it's very different how you build a team in both those leagues. But hey, that's also why they probably brought in Rick Spielman as well. Because Rick Spielman, he's been in the league for a very long time. He's been in the league as a general manager for a really long time. A rather successful general manager as well. So that'll probably help things along. But it was an interesting hiring. And Josh Harris has owned franchises in the past that have had a lot of success. So I trust him in this, in knowing what he's doing. So this is going to be very interesting to see how this franchise looks moving forward with those two guys now leading the charge in the front office. It'll be an interesting thing to keep their eye on, but I can't imagine it'll be super hard to fuck up as far as the draft goes, because like I said, they are sitting with the second overall pick. They will at the very least get Drake May, if not Caleb Williams, depending on how Chicago still feels about Justin Fields. But yeah, it's a very intriguing situation moving forward. And one more firing that happened this week that I don't remember the last time I was this shocked at a coaching firing. A move that there was some rumblings about, but I didn't really take all that seriously because I thought it would be stupid if this team made this move. And that was the Tennessee Titans choosing to fire Mike Vrabel after 6 seasons with kind of up and down success. First few years had a lot of success. I mean, after all, this team back in 2019 made it all the way to the AFC Championship game as a wild card team. Not the very next year, a couple years later, were the number 1 seed in the AFC. Vrabel was labeled as the coach of the year in February 2022. And now here we are 2 years later, and he's fired after what was essentially one bad year. And maybe y'all can help me understand this, because I genuinely don't understand it. Because Mike Vrabel, I don't understand how Titans ownership can look at this past season, looking at this roster with the lack of talent, especially on offense, trading away some good pieces, a team that came into this year not expecting to do a whole lot, and it was kind of the same thing. I don't understand how Titans ownership in the front office looked at this team this year and walked away saying Mike Vrabel was the problem. I don't understand it. This is a team, this is a coach who still has a great what's the name of it? A great culture. There we go. I don't know why I blanked on that. He still has instilled a great culture in that organization. He still has that team willing to play and run through a wall for him. After all, I mean, they wouldn't have beaten the Jaguars the way they did on Sunday if that weren't the case. So this team has still got something good going with Mike Vrabel, and now they're sitting here with all the success that I already mentioned earlier of reaching the AFC title game, being a number 1 seed in the conference not too long ago, and sitting here after all that, after basically one bad year, I know last year they were in a great spot and then they lost 7 games to end the season. I get all that. But basically after one bad year, you're saying, Vrabel, you're gone? Okay, and replace him with who? The only other situation I can think of that was similar to this, of a team firing a head coach, a very good head coach, when I felt like they shouldn't have, was when the Miami Dolphins fired Brian Flores after 2020. No, that wasn't after 2020. After 2021 was when they fired Brian Flores. And I was sitting here, I was like, at the time, I was like, that is such a confusing and dumb move. Thankfully, the Dolphins survived it because they were able to hire Mike McDaniel, and they've made the playoffs the last couple of years. But to sit here and say that, hey, the Titans can do the exact same thing, where are you going to find another coach like Mike McDaniel? Like, how are you confident? Like, they must be confident that they can land fucking Ben Johnson or Jim Harbaugh. They have to be confident that they're going to land one of those guys, because it doesn't make sense why you would get rid of a coach who is still one of the best coaches in the NFL after, like I said, one bad year where the roster he was working with was devoid of talent. Because 2 years ago, you had this roster that was a consistent playoff contender and a championship contender because you had Derrick Henry in his prime. You still had A.J. Brown. You had all these great pieces around you. And then what does the front office do? They trade away A.J. Brown because they can't come to an agreement. They trade away Kevin Byard at the deadline this year. They let all these guys who are key contributors walk. They don't want to pay certain guys, some of their best players. And now, I mean, they let go of Taylor Lewan. They let go of Ben Jones. They let go of all these great players and really didn't bother to truly replace all those guys. I know they tried to do with A.J. Brown with Treylon Burks, but he hasn't amassed to anything. I don't get how you can blame all that on Mike Vrabel. He did the best he could with the roster he was given. That's not on him. But let me tell you something. Whoever's out there who's going to be in line for a head coach, you know Mike Vrabel's going to be at the top of their list. Shit, why wouldn't he? He's proven that he can be incredibly successful as a head coach. He's proven he can build an incredible culture, There's no reason to sit here and say why he's not going to find a job very quickly. Where that could be, we don't know. I have a speculation about a team that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But as far as the Tennessee Titans go, you better get this next hire right, or else this could be a move that's going to set this franchise back years. And I do really mean years. So those are the coaches that have been fired up to this point. One coach that has yet to be fired, that there has been a lot of rumors around. We haven't heard any news on it yet. That we could hear news very soon, probably maybe this week, maybe next week at the latest. But nothing's been confirmed at the time of its recording. Maybe by the time you watch this, something would have happened. I don't know. But I'm of course talking about Bill Belichick. And that was the big storyline. That's been the storyline for most of this year. That's been the storyline coming into this week. It's been the storyline coming out of this week is what the hell's going to happen with Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. You know, they have a meeting scheduled. I think they already had it. I'm not entirely sure. Between Belichick and the Krafts, Robert Kraft and Jonathan Kraft, as far as talking about what the plan is moving forward and talking about why the team has fallen off so drastically compared to years past. And it's a great question that honestly I think is a relatively easy answer. And that is Bill Belichick, who is the general manager. Yes, we have Matt Groh, who is technically the director of player personnel, and he's also in there. I think he's also just as responsible. But at the end of the day, Belichick has the final say because Belichick's the one that has the GM title. He's the one that has that title. He's had the title for as long as I can remember. And his decisions in player personnel have really put this team back drastically from a talent perspective. And I mentioned this earlier in the year where Bill Belichick built this roster as if Tom Brady was still here. If Tom Brady was still here, who knows? This might be an above 500 football team if Tom Brady was still here. But Tom Brady was not here. Instead, you're dealing with Mac Jones, whose confidence was completely shot. You're dealing with a Bailey Zappi that the entire fan base was talking about how, hey, maybe Bailey Zappi should be viewed as the starter going into next year. And I'm sitting here saying, you fucking idiots, he's worse than Mac. So then you talk about the receivers and his inability to draft good offensive players. You know, not jumping at the opportunity to sign DeAndre Hopkins because he didn't think he was worth the money, but thought Devontae Parker was worth $33 million. Choosing not to make a move for a receiver at the deadline, but the second a need popped up at corner, he was right on it when Christian Gonzalez went down. And that's the thing, like, the defense is not the problem. The defense was not the problem. I mean, hell, there was a point this year there was a 4-game stretch during, I don't even remember where, it was like in the middle of November, where the Patriots defense gave up an average of 10.75 points a game. Round that up, they've given up, there was a 4-game stretch where the Patriots defense let up 11 points per game. And the team went 0-4 in that stretch. There was a 4-game stretch in the middle of the season where the defense gave up 11 points per game and the team went 0-4 in that same stretch. That shouldn't be possible on any level, let alone the NFL level. And again, it all comes down to how he built this roster on the offensive side of the ball. And that's why I'm saying that if it were up to me, I would keep Belichick on as the head coach, but say you cannot be in charge of player personnel. You cannot be in charge of that whatsoever. I don't feel comfortable with the idea because this team is going to go into this year. They have the 3rd overall pick. They have about, I think, $85 million in available cap space for free agency. This team has the grocery list to get competitive again really, really fast. The question is, do you trust Bill Belichick to be the one to shop for those groceries? And I don't have that faith in him anymore. So if you're able to retain him as a head coach, though, because I was just talking about that defense, they were still 9th in the league this year in DVOA. Fucking 4-13 football team. And they were still 9th in the league in DVOA on the defensive side of the ball. How the fuck that's possible, I don't fucking know. But again, it just shows, like, and even during the later stretch of the season, like, the team was still competing. They were still in close games. They just couldn't do shit on the offensive side of the ball. So Belichick has shown that he can still be a good coach He's the greatest coach of all time for a reason. I don't think Belichick has forgotten how to coach a football team. But if you're able to retain him as the coach, I am all for that. Because it's going to be hard to find another coach as great as him. But the question is he going to want to be the coach while also having GM responsibilities taken away from him? Is that something he's going to be okay with, considering the man is 70 years old? At this point, at this stage in his career, is that something that he's going to be okay with? He said in his postseason press conference that he was going to do whatever he could to make sure this team was successful, even if that means not being involved in player personnel decisions. He said that himself, but actions speak louder than words. And I still have to see it in order to believe it. And it's tough because I still love him as a coach. And if it were up to me, like I said, I would keep him as the head coach. But if he doesn't want to be the coach while also not having GM responsibilities, then I think moving on from him would be the best choice. Because looking at how this team has gone from the top tier of the league all the way down, yes, you lost Tom Brady, but the problems with this team were deeper than Tom Brady just leaving. But the question is, if he doesn't want to do that, if he's not willing to compromise on that, what could possibly happen? Could they just straight up fire him? I don't know, because if they did, that would have happened by now, I feel like. Could they work out a trade where the Krafts say, hey, you pick the spot, we'll work out a deal and send him there? I heard if that's the case, the Atlanta Falcons are a big name swirling around as far as a team that could be interested in Belichick's services. Or could the Patriots and Belichick just agree to mutually part ways? That's also a possibility. But it's going to be very interesting. And as far as what New England could do, hey, guess who just came available? A man who just got inducted into the Patriots Hall of Fame earlier this year, who during that speech, despite being the head coach of another team, still referred to his time as the Patriots as we. If they do choose to move on from Belichick, Vrabel would absolutely be the guy, and I can imagine Vrabel would absolutely take the job in a heartbeat if they decide to move on from Belichick. If. But that's all on that. Now let's go into, because like I said, regular season's over, which means the playoffs are here. The motherfucking playoffs are here, baby. It's time to talk some playoff football. So let's go in to these previews. Let's do a little super wild card weekend preview for a bit. Starting off with the first game that's happening, the first playoff game of the 2023-2024 NFL season is going to be a matchup that nobody in a million years thought was going to happen coming into the season. Coming into this football season, when you're thinking about potential playoff teams and playoff matchups, who had the Joe Flacco-led Cleveland Browns heading in to take the CJ Stroud-led Houston Texans in Houston as the first playoff game on the NFL bingo card? Who had that? Script writers went fucking bonkers this year. Now, when you think about that on paper before the season, of like, hey, Browns versus Texans, gee, I wonder what the storyline is that going to be in that game. But the one guy that would have been the main storyline is, guess what? Not playing. He hasn't played for most of the year. That guy, of course, being Deshaun Watson. But Think about it, though. Even without that, this is a remarkable game that I'm excited to see because it's between two really Cinderella teams in situations that you didn't expect them to be in the postseason. First, starting out with the Cleveland Browns. A Cleveland Browns team that lost the aforementioned Deshaun Watson, even though he wasn't playing really well. But they were still winning games because that defense was incredible. Then Watson gets hurt when he looks like he's finally getting it together. Gets hurt, out for the season. And now their season seemingly over. They go from Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who's inconsistent, to PJ Walker, who was incredibly up and down. It was so bad that they brought in a 40-year-old Joe Flacco on the practice squad initially, only to then elevate him and make him the starter. All hope is seemingly lost. Season's over for the Cleveland Browns. Except Joe Flacco thought it would be funny to turn the clock back 11 years, back to his 2012 Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl run form, and play like the elite quarterback that we were all debating on if he fucking was back 10 years ago. Remember that debate 10 years ago in 2013 and 2014 of, is Joe Flacco elite? Should he be paid like an elite quarterback? And then he did get paid and we're like, is he an elite quarterback that's worth that money? That was the whole running bit for like 3 years with Joe Flacco was, is he elite? Is he not elite? Well, guess what? In 2023, at age 40 for the Cleveland Browns, he is fucking elite. He is single-handedly saved the Browns season when it looked dead in the water, and it should have been dead in the water. And he has risen like a phoenix from the ashes and saved this Cleveland Browns team, and they've become fun to root for. I didn't think this team was going to be fun to root for coming into the year. Their quarterback was fucking Deshaun Watson. I didn't want this team to succeed. But guess what? With a 40-year-old Joe Flacco who's playing the best football of his career since that 2012 Ravens Super Bowl run, I want to root for this team now. Amari Cooper has returned to form. He's a Pro Bowler again this year. Kareem Hunt they brought back. They got a bit of a running game again, despite losing Nick Chubb early in the year. That defense is still balling out. Myles Garrett is a fucking menace to society. This is going to be a fun team to watch to see how far they can go in the postseason. Except their opponent is not a team to just push to the side, though. Because, again, coming into this season, you're talking about a Houston Texans team that was still on paper one of the worst rosters in the NFL, a rebuilding team with a rookie head coach in DeMeco Ryans and a rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud, who, you know, some people had a few questions about coming into the season. Was, you know, some people tried to argue that he was better than Bryce Young, and was he actually better than Bryce Young? And, you know, there was rumblings that he should have gone number 1 overall, but like test scores, and he's an Ohio State quarterback, and we know how Ohio State quarterbacks fare in the NFL, and there was so much speculation and intrigue around how CJ Stroud was going to look at the NFL level. Year 1 in, and he's already among the elites of the league. He's already a top 10 quarterback in the league in just his rookie year. DeMeco Ryans is already in the running for coach of the year. In my opinion, he's the favorite. Because, again, you look at this team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. He was the defensive coordinator for a couple of years in San Francisco. He got head coaching considerations last year in 2022 that he turned down. And he came in with this roster on the defensive side of the ball that they drafted Will Anderson, 3rd overall. But other than that, they didn't really have a whole lot of talent. And yet he turned them into a top 10 unit. There's no reason that defense should have been a top 10 defense throughout the season. There was no reason why this offense should be putting up points at will consistently with a rookie quarterback and a receiving core that wasn't really highly talented coming into the year. But little did we know that Tank Dell was going to be in the running for Offensive Rookie of the Year along with CJ Stroud. And then when he went down, Nico Collins turns into fucking God himself. We didn't anticipate this stuff. That's why football is the greatest sport in the world. That's why the NFL is the greatest sports league in the world. Because you see shit like this that you don't anticipate to happen, and yet it happens. Reality really is stranger than fiction. And in year 1 year removed from being the second worst team in the NFL, after we thought they got screwed over for the future when Lovie Smith won in the final game of the season last year, when they got stuck with the second overall pick and everyone was saying they had to settle for CJ Stroud now. That ended up being the biggest blessing this franchise will ever receive. The Texans are really back. They really, really are back. And I didn't expect them to be back like this early. And it sucks that these two really likable teams, for the most part, are playing against each other. Because I really want to see both these teams make deep playoff runs. But only one of them will have that chance. But damn it, it'll be a fun game to watch, for sure. That was the first game on Saturday. Second game on Saturday is going to be another revenge game. An actual revenge game. Tyreek Hill and the Miami Dolphins, after losing the way they did in Miami to the Buffalo Bills to lose out on the division title that they had in their hands for most of the season, they are going to take the trip to Arrowhead. Tyreek Hill's first game going to Arrowhead Stadium as a visitor to take on the Kansas City Chiefs in a game that, as of right now, the forecast projects it as being 12 degrees with negative 19 degree wind chill. So it's going to be fucking cold in Kansas City, Missouri. And you know Tyreek Hill is going to be eager to play this football game because, yes, he played the Chiefs. Yes, the Dolphins played the Chiefs earlier this year, but that game was in London. This is going to be a game in Arrowhead, in the cold, in the playoffs, win or go home. And both these teams have kind of had a bit of up and down years. Miami was a bit more consistent, though they kind of fell off towards the end of the season when they had a great chance to wrap up the division and they failed out on that. And then there was this whole narrative around them was, can they beat good teams? When they play against good teams, can they hang with them? And they proved that after beating the Dallas Cowboys later in the year. And then you're dealing with the Kansas City Chiefs, which we know their story. Great franchise, won 2 of the last 4 Super Bowls, been to 3 of the last 4. But this year has been a really rough year. They're still good enough to win their division, but this doesn't feel like the same Kansas City Chiefs team of old. Patrick Mahomes is basically out there trying to do everything he can to will this team to victory. The receivers have been an issue all year. We know this. Travis Kelce has not been the Travis Kelce of old. The defense has really saved this Chiefs team this year, which has not been the case during these past few years. But Spags has really got this defense going. They've won multiple games this year because of that defense. And they're going to need that defense to come up big, because they're playing against a Miami Dolphin team in the cold. We don't know how the Dolphins are going to fare in the cold. Playing against Tyreek Hill, who they've played against and practiced for years. So you got to think they know how his tendencies are. And it's going to be very intriguing. It's definitely going to be very intriguing. And because here's the thing. I'm nervous for the Kansas City Chiefs, but at the same time, it is Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. It was the same thing like Brady and the Patriots for so many years, where it's like it doesn't matter if they limp into the postseason or not. Once they get into the dance, they are going to be very dangerous, and you can't count them out until they're dead. But with that being said, I'm very intrigued to see how this game ends up playing out. And then we get to Sunday. 3 games on Sunday. Starting off with the Steelers heading to Buffalo to take on the Buffalo Bills, who are playing a home playoff game this year, where in the middle of the year that looked like a fairy tale. When the Bills were 6-6, they were 6-6 coming off a heartbreaking loss at home to the Denver Broncos on Monday Night Football that led to them immediately firing their offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey. They brought in Joe Brady. They elevated Joe Brady to be the interim OC. And ever since then, a light switch has flipped. All of a sudden, the Buffalo Bills that we've been accustomed to seeing over these past few years showed up again. They got James Cook involved. He looks like a star in the making. Josh Allen has been an incredible player that should have been a Pro Bowler, in my opinion, over Patrick Mahomes as far as this year is concerned. I understand why, because he did throw a lot of interceptions to the first half of the season, but he was playing incredible the latter half of the season. And a defense that has shown up to play despite the fact that it's a defense made out of scotch tape and fucking cardboard. Like, there has been so many Pro Bowl talents that have been injured for this defense throughout the year, from Tre'Davious White to Matt Milano and Von Miller. And, you know, it's been so incredible how this defense, being so injured to shit and back, is still playing relatively well and was still able to hold an incredible Dolphins offense in check in Miami. That's incredible. And now they're playing against a Pittsburgh Steelers team that is... Mike Tomlin, how the fuck does he keep doing it? How the fuck does Mike Tomlin keep doing it? This team is once again not only finishing the year with a winning record, but is finishing by going into the postseason. Again, this team had no business being in the playoffs this year, and yet they managed to sneak in. How? I don't get it. I don't know. I don't understand it. It's football. I'm not supposed to understand it. So I'm not even going to question it. But it's going to be a rough go for the Pittsburgh Steelers because they are going to be playing this game without TJ Watt. TJ Watt suffered an MCL sprain, a grade 2 MCL sprain, I think it was. And he's going to miss this game. He might miss a couple weeks, so it's going to be rough for them. But offensively, they've been kind of inconsistent all year. We'll see how this team holds up. Because, in my opinion, I think it's going to be a slaughter. Because it is going to be the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo after all. But, again, you never know, man. You never know. So, that's probably the game I'm least intrigued about going into the wild card weekend. Oh, I'm sorry. Super wild card weekend. And then later tonight is another matchup of a 7 seed versus a 2 seed. This one's going to be a little more interesting and should be a little more competitive. It's going to be in Dallas. The Dallas Cowboys taking on the Jordan Love-led Green Bay Packers. I told y'all. I told y'all that Jordan Love was going to be really good. I told y'all the Packers were going to be a sneaky good team. I told y'all the Packers were going to shock the world. And sure enough, I was fucking right. I said it. Everyone was just writing off, assuming that Jordan Love was going to be terrible and assuming the Packers offense was going to be terrible, that just because they had a bunch of rookies or second-year players. I said just because they had a bunch of rookies and second-year players doesn't mean that they're bad players. And sure enough, they're not bad. Christian Watson is still there. He still looks really good. Jayden Reed has been a breakout player for them. Dontavian Wicks has come out of fucking nowhere. Aaron Jones is still there. He's still as good as ever. They have a couple really good, nice tight ends. And then, of course, the cherry on top, Jordan Love himself. The Packers, man, they just keep getting spoiled with these great quarterbacks, man. They have not had a bad quarterback since 1992. When Brett Favre took over for the Magic Man. Don Majkowski, I think was how you pronounce his name, or whatever the fuck. They have had great quarterback play, Hall of Fame level quarterback play since 1992, from Brett Favre for all those years, and then he had Aaron Rodgers for all those years, and now you're seemingly going to have Jordan Love for the next 15 years. And he's only going to get better, I can imagine, once he gets more reps under his belt. Now, the thing that's going to cost this Packers team is going to be Joe Barry's defense. Not because of the players on that defense, but because Joe Barry himself is an idiot. After all, this was the same man that gave up 30 points to a Panthers team that didn't score a single point in the last, 3 games of the season? Joe Barry's defense gave up 30 points to the Carolina Panthers. And then every game for the Panthers after that Packers game, they did not score a single point. So if they lose this game, it's going to be because of Joe Barry. And they're going against a Cowboys offense that I am mortified of, because Dak Prescott's been playing the best football of his career, by far, in my opinion. CeeDee Lamb has emerged as the next guy in Dallas. Tony Pollard has not been as good this year. The running game as a whole has not been that great this year. But that passing game has been so good that it almost doesn't even matter. So I'm nervous for the Packers on that standpoint, but even if this ends up being a slaughter, even if the Cowboys run the Packers out of Jerry World, if you're a Packers fan, I don't know how you feel anything else for this season other than just optimism and joy. Because remember, this was a team that everyone just wrote off before preseason even started. And they're playing in a playoff game where I don't think they're just a team that's going to get run off the field. It's going to be a fun game, and I'm really excited to see it. Even if the Packers don't win, I'm excited to see how they look going into the future. And I don't know how the fuck the Packers keep doing it, man. I don't know how they keep doing it. And then last game that happened on... Actually, no. Let me talk about the Monday game first. Because there is one game that's happening on Monday, and then I'm going to talk about the Sunday night game on after for the last one. Monday night is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles limping into Tampa Bay to take on the Baker Mayfield-led Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm going to talk about the Bucs first, because yes, they won because they were in a dog shit division, but they were supposed to be dead last in this division coming into the year. They were post-Brady. They had a bunch of guys on their team that were aging. The team didn't look good last year, despite winning that terrible division. They brought in Baker Mayfield that everyone thought was kind of washed or inconsistent at best. And yet Baker Mayfield looks like a new man. Baker Mayfield has played really, really well this year. He's reinvigorated Mike Evans. And I always got the sense with Mike Evans that he never had the greatest chemistry with Tom Brady. But Baker comes in, and Mike Evans reminds everybody why he's most likely going to be a Hall of Famer. Every year he's been in the NFL, he has yet to have a season where he has had under 1,000 yards receiving. He has gone off this year. I think he had 15 touchdowns on the year. 13 or 15 touchdowns. He definitely had double digits. He just went off this year. Chris Godwin still looks really good. Rashad White has been pretty good in the run game as well. Also been a threat out of the backfield. He's been their offense for some games. And the defense, they still have some pieces there. So this is a very shocking year for the Tampa Bay Bucks. I still think they're going to end up going quarterback in the draft because I don't know how much of a long-term option Baker Mayfield actually is. But we'll see. But this has been a pretty successful year for the Bucks for the most part, considering that nobody expected them to be competitive coming into the year. It's kind of been the story of a lot of playoff teams this year, is teams making it that no one expected to be super competitive are making the playoffs this year. Just shows you that this league is so unpredictable. And they might have a legitimate shot at winning this weekend because they are going to be playing against an Eagles team that is in the middle of one of the greatest single season collapses. One of the greatest collapses of all time. This was I want to read you off a stat that shocked me when I first heard it. The Philadelphia Eagles are the first team to start off the season with 10 wins, going 10-1. First team in league history to go 10-1, to start off a year 10-1, and not finish the year with at least 12 wins. First team in league history to do that. And they had an extra game compared to teams of past. So they had 6 games to reach at least 12 wins. And they finished the year 1-5. They had embarrassing losses to the Cardinals. They had an embarrassing loss on Sunday against the Giants where they got blown out in the first half 24-0 to the Giants, and you couldn't even use the excuse of they were resting starters. They were playing Jalen Hurts. They were playing A.J. Brown. They were playing Devonta Smith. They were playing all their starters in that game against the Giants on Sunday, and they still got blown out. How? I don't understand how this team has fallen off a cliff so bad. Even when they were 10-1, we were starting to look and be like, hey, how good is this Eagles team actually? You know, because the defense was not as dominant as it was last year. This defense, they've had so many issues. The front seven was not as dominant as it was last year. Jalen Carter looked like at the start that he was going to be the runaway defensive rookie of the year until he started playing actual offensive lines later in the year, and all of a sudden he didn't look as dominant. The secondary has been completely obliterated because their top 2 corners haven't played for much of the year, and they've been burnt so many times this year. Offensively, there should be no excuse for them to be this bad. Because it's the same offense as last year. It's the same offense on paper as their Super Bowl run. Jalen Hurts is still there. A.J. Brown's still there. Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. The only addition they did was they swapped out Miles Sanders for DeAndre Swift, which was seen as an upgrade. So in theory, they should be better and more well-rounded. So you have the same quarterback who was an MVP candidate last year. You have the same receiving tandem who's still one of the best receiving tandems in the league. You upgraded at running back. You still have the best offensive line in football. You still have an underrated tight end in Dallas Goedert who has emerged as a top 5 tight end in football, and little to no injuries on the offensive side of the ball, and you're still this bad and inconsistent? How does that even fucking work? And it just shows once more how desperately this team misses Shane Steichen, who, by the way, did a phenomenal coaching job with the Indianapolis Colts this year. But the Eagles have just completely... They've lost their identity on offense. I can't remember the last time they've run a play on offense that wasn't run out of shotgun. And running plays out of shotgun just completely neuters your offense, especially when the running game is concerned, because it's hard to have a good running game when you're running out of shotgun. It's hard to do anything in the run game outside of shotgun because it's so easy for defenses to play it. And when you can't run the football, it completely destroys your play action game. So you can't get big plays down the field. And even then, from a pass game standpoint, Jalen Hurts has not been as good in the passing game this year as he was last year. And that's because they haven't had a good running game to fall back on because they refuse to run anything outside of the shotgun formation. So it's like they try to make the game of football as hard on themselves as humanly possible. And they just keep getting in their own way. And that's how you go from starting out the year 10-1 to finishing 11-6. That's how you limp into the playoffs in a game where you're not even fully confident that you can beat the fucking Bucs. I'm not going to talk more about the Philadelphia Eagles because at this point it'd be beating a dead horse. Everything that's been said all year, I've already said it. I've said it right now. I don't feel confident about the Philadelphia Eagles. There's a legitimate chance that they can get one and done by the fucking Bucs. And that would be the ultimate disappointment. And that is the sign of, hey, we need to figure out the problem now. If that means firing Nick Sirianni, then you might just have to do that because Sirianni, ever since Steichen left and even Jonathan Gannon left, and that was a guy that Eagles fans they couldn't wait to push Jonathan Gannon out the door as he went and took the head coaching job for the Arizona Cardinals, only for him to come back in later in the year, walk into your house with, on paper, the worst roster in the NFL, and beat you convincingly. And here you are with Matt Patricia as your de facto defensive coordinator. It's fucking sad, man. It's sad. That's all on that. But last game we got to talk about is the game that I'm anticipating the most. I think everybody's anticipating the most. A game that is in prime time, and rightfully so. The Matthew Stafford led Los Angeles Rams. Yet another team that was supposed to be really bad coming into the year and have racked off a bunch of wins and are playing in the postseason yet again. The Matthew Stafford-led Los Angeles Rams walking into Ford Field to take on the Detroit Lions. I'm going to run through this pretty fast because we are going to be over an hour here in a minute. But we knew this was going to be a matchup for a few weeks now. And it's almost like the perfect playoff matchup in the circumstances of this. You're talking about the Detroit Lions, who have not won a division title before this season in 30 years. The last time the Detroit Lions were division champions, the NFC North was not even a thing yet, and Barry Sanders was in year 5. Barry Sanders was playing in his 5th NFL season the last time the Detroit Lions played a home playoff game. And now here we are. After all the misery the Lions have suffered, from 0-16 to bust after bust after bust, losing season after losing season after losing season. But there was a stretch there in the 2000s where they had a little bit of hope every year because they had not only had Calvin Johnson, but they also had a quarterback for once in Matthew Stafford. He was a consistent, good, stable force at the quarterback position for so many years with such great talent, such incredible arm strength, a true leader in the locker room. But when they changed regimes for the, I don't know how many times Stafford was there, Stafford said, you know what, I've had enough. We're not going to win anything here for a while. Ironically, he made that decision after they hired Dan Campbell. He wasn't too fond, I'm guessing, of the biting kneecaps opening press conference that Campbell had, and thought, you know what? I've been here for too long. We've changed regimes so many times. I think I want out. I want a chance to compete. And they said, okay. They sent him to the Rams. And in his first year in Los Angeles, he quarterbacks the Rams to a Super Bowl victory. First year out of Detroit, he wins a Super Bowl. And everybody's feeling so great for him, especially the city of Detroit, that Stafford finally got the Super Bowl ring he deserved. Then last year fell off a little bit because he'd been dealing with injuries. The Rams as a whole dealt with injuries. But here we are once again, back in the playoffs with Cooper Kupp back from injuries, Puka Nacua becoming a next mega star in football, breaking both the rookie receiving yards record and both rookie receptions record. Kyren Williams coming out of nowhere, and he's been an absolute force for the Rams whenever he's played. Another example of a guy who isn't the greatest athlete in the world, but god damn it, is he a great football player. And the Rams are back in the playoffs, playing against the Detroit Lions of all teams. A team that everyone was worried about what the direction of this team was going when they hired Dan Campbell and he did the biting of the kneecap opening presser. They weren't very good in his first year as head coach in 2021. They were picking second overall in 2022, where they drafted Aiden Hutchinson, who's been a really good player for them. He's been just as good as advertised. But they started building this thing slowly. They started building this thing. They accumulated talent. They brought in, obviously they drafted Amon-Ra St. Brown in 2021, who's been the best slot receiver in football. They brought in guys like David Montgomery free agency. They drafted guys like Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta, guys that we were laughing at them for drafting. And here they are with the last laugh, because both those guys have been major factors for them to have the offensive success they had and to make this playoff run. And Jared Goff. Everyone's talking about this being a revenge game for Matthew Stafford. This is a revenge game for Jared Goff as well. Because remember, Goff was the quarterback for the Rams for a long time. And then he got sent to Detroit in that same trade for Matthew Stafford. So this is a big game for him as well. But this is going to be a massive game. And I wish I was in the building for this game, because you just know that Ford Field is going to be rocking. This is going to be a fun game to watch for so many different reasons. And I don't think I've ever been this excited for a playoff game, especially a wild card game. I don't think I've ever been this excited to watch it. So I am so unbelievably excited. I think everybody who loves football is going to be excited to watch this game as well. But ladies and gentlemen, we are running over time. So that is going to put a wrap on the video. Like I said before, if you're not done so already, please like, subscribe, and share the video with anybody you know who would enjoy this kind of content. That'd mean the absolute world to me. Oh, and if you'd like to support the channel financially, go support me on Patreon, patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. The link to that is in the description down below. But with that being said, I'm Double Diesel. Peace.